May revision proposal.
Thank you. Public comment on issue number 1.
Kobe Pizzati with California Association of Psychiatric Technicians. We support the May revision proposal to expand the cap at Porterville. We'd also like to note that there's roughly 2,000 to 3,000 individuals in our prison system today that have developmental disabilities. Would they should certainly be in a place much like Porterville instead of a prison. So as you look forward towards the future of developmental centers, that's something to consider.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment? As reflected on page 31 of the agenda, we're going to recommend placeholder language that talks about approval of half of the requested funding and positions for the budget year, so we can continue to determine if that really is feasible at $9 million general fund with the 92.3 positions, again as placeholder amount, and have the staff work with the administration, stakeholders, and policy committee and LAO to make recommendations for the appropriate number of beds in the secure treatment program and transitional beds in the general treatment program and other statutory changes that would reduce the demand on STP and transitional beds, including but not limited to alternative locations for the provision of IST services, improving the delivery of services in the STP and transitional beds, and other strategies for reducing placements and the length of stay in the STP and transitional beds. 3.0 recommendation. Thank you. Issue number 2, Sonoma Development Center for Intermediate Care Facilities, the ICF units.
Yes, this issue addresses the general fund backfill on the 4 non-certified units at Sonoma. This is the amount for that, $4.4 million in the current year, reflects the, to date, the eligibility of the residents in the ICF, the Intermediate Care Facility at Sonoma, and the projected costs. We do want to note here that we are in plans to consolidate down by 1 of the non-certified units. Again, the way we do this is just like we do for any other movement. We do it a person at a time by the person's IPP. And so we'll be proceeding with that and hopefully have that done in a couple months, and then we'll know more about how that would impact costs later.
LAO.
We believe the placeholder trailer bill language as proposed in the staff recommendation will improve legislative oversight.
Great, thank you. Finance? Public comment.
Madam Chair, members, Carl London on behalf of the California Disability Services Association. We certainly support the staff recommendation in your agenda. Would like to make one further comment and a recommendation, and that is that we consider, as we're talking about developmental center closures, that we consider adding additional language that would prioritize closure for those units where we've already lost the federal funding or a significant risk for losing the federal funding. That ought to be the highest priority for closure as we move forward with planning that, no matter what the process is, because it means more dollars out of the general fund and away from everything else that we would all think money should go toward in the state budget. So we'd ask you to consider that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Madam Chair, members, Dwight Hanson on behalf of the Alliance, Easter Seals of Superior California, and STEP agency. My concern a little bit about transferring consumers within the DCs from a non-compliant to a compliant. This isn't because the building is in bad shape. This is because there were problems. So moving the person and all the staff and everybody to a different building doesn't seem to solve the problem. So we support the staff recommendation and reiterate what Mr. London just said. We need to move those folks out because those folks will be immediately matchable in the community, and that would be the quickest way to get the federal money back in.
Thank you. Senator Stone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I know that this committee really is left no choice but to support this recommendation. I'm just going to be the symbolic no, just because we need to make sure that we move down this track that is preserving general fund money for a better bang for the buck, if you will. So I understand the Fed's pulled out. We got a backfill. We just can't pull the carpet out from underneath these very worthy disabled citizens. And so I'll register a no just to incentivize staff to know that we are on top of this and we understand we have to do it, but we really need to move in a different direction to capitalize on giving more people services for the money that we're spending. So
I'm going to recommend support of the proposed placeholder budget language in the bottom of page 31, primarily because it continues to engage us through the Joint Legislative Budget Committee and other policy committees because they're required to give us notice regarding the status of the CMS federal Medicaid funding. I think that's critically important for us to be informed as soon as they know, as well as approval of supplemental report language that requires DDS to provide within 90 days of a determination that federal funding will not be continued for ICF units. And all the languages outlined on pages 31 and 32 of the agenda.
So moved.
So that will be out with a 2-to-1 recommendation. Issue number 3, staffing adjustments for acute crisis units.
Yes, the staffing adjustments for the acute crisis units. This is in line with the trailer bill language from last year that established the crisis homes as separate residences, one at Fairview, one at Sonoma. Both are open. Both now have 2 individuals at each center and one getting ready to come in at Fairview. Also consistent with the DC Task Force recommendation that we continue to offer safety net services with acute crisis stabilization.
LAO, Finance. Public comment on issue number 3, staffing adjustments. Seeing none, I recommend approval of the May revise.
I'm going to hold off.
Okay.
No vote at this time.
Senator Monning, you all right?
Motion?
No, you okay? Okay, that's a 2-0 recommendation. Issue number 4, program improvement plans for Fairview and Porterville.
Yes, this is in relation to the staffing relief adjustments for positions at Fairview for undelivered positions. These level of care nursing positions are providing their relief to adjust for filled but undelivered positions at the DCs. As we mentioned before, every DC is still running with a number of filled but undelivered positions in hard to recruit areas. Progress is being made slowly. In some cases, we had some constraint with adjusting costs at Fairview, but we've allowed them to change their hiring practices, so we're expecting everyone to come online. Porterville is 100% hired on their PIT positions and just moving them from limited term in the registry to permanent. And Sonoma is complete on their PIT positions as well.
LAO, Finance. Public comment. Seeing none, page 33, I'll entertain approval of the May revise. And again, based on the staff comment, based on the concern that a significant amount of general fund dollars have been invested without really the desired outcome in terms of receiving federal funding participation restored. The previous action will also include, this action will also include what we did in the previous action, which requires that DDS report to the legislature regarding once you've been notified from CMS about any potential of the discontinuation of additional federal funding. It's important that we know.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
you know, we've sunk millions of dollars into the program improvement plans, and it certainly hasn't changed the federal certification of those units at Sonoma. So it's just spending, again, more precious money on these plans. So I'll vote no at this time on this.
Thank you, and that will be out with a 2-to-1 vote. Issue 5, Lanterman Development Center land transfer.
Yes, we're currently working with Cal State University Pomona to work on the MOU for the transfer of jurisdiction at Cal State University Pomona. There is a section in there on land use, potential land use, as well as all the other conditions for transfer. And we are, as reported last time, continue to meet with them on that.
Right. Exactly. Thank you, LAO. Finance.
We do not support this legislative proposal. The department and CSU are still in negotiations trying to figure out what is the best options for the DD consumers at this time, and we're not sure if that will be housing, it could be employment, it could be several different activities that they're still working on.
Thank you. Senator Stone, would you like to go before public comment or after?
A question, if it's okay, Madam Chair.
Sure, of course.
You know, I've been very consistent in my direction that, you know, when we take the assets of these developmental centers, that we need to return those assets, either land, infrastructure, or money, back into our disabled pool of money to take care of these people. So my concern is that you're embarking on a negotiation to, I understand, basically hand the land over to roughly, 200 acres to Cal Poly. My concern is that we're, helping education, which I strongly support, but I don't want to do it at the expense of our developmentally disadvantaged communities. So there needs to be some compensation, some money going into our funds. So how are you progressing on those negotiations? Is that a point that you're trying to drive in the negotiations, or is this kind of a fait accompli already?
No, there is a section in the MOU that we have right now that says we can develop for public-private partnerships for, as we talked about before, not just affordable housing, but other resources that might be necessary for the community. And that would be taking place as part of the master planning process that they go through as the land switches over. So our proposal right now is that gets incorporated into that master planning process.
Okay, I appreciate your answer. I'm going to be looking at what resources are coming out of this transaction that are going to be helping the developmentally disadvantaged communities at a time when we really need the help. So thank you for your leadership on that.
Public comment, 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members, Carl London on behalf of CDSA. I want to, a huge ditto to what Senator Stone had to say. It is awfully hard to look at the January or May revision of this budget with absolutely zero in this budget to benefit community-based programs for this population that desperately needs it, and then also propose in the same breath that we give away a property and assets that have been serving this population for decades at zero cost. That is incredibly frustrating to look at. The legislature can make a policy statement if it wants to, and we would urge you to do it, to look at these properties as an extension of the service system, grab them, and at least take part of this back to the community so we can serve this population fairly and in accordance with the Lanterman Act. To do otherwise is to just strip us of property and assets that have been serving the community or this population for a long, long time. As we look at Sonoma, as we look at Fairview, Sonoma's been in service for many decades. We can't just give this stuff away for free. And it's awfully hard to feel great about the education system getting a free chunk of land out of our community and getting nothing in return in the governor's budget or the May revision.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next witness.
Eileen Ritchie, ARCA. I would like to commend the committee and the staff for this very creative proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Well, Senator, Futures Explored, I agree with the prior comment on anytime we can increase our housing for our folks, we should take every opportunity we can to do so.
Thank you. Next witness.
Madam Chair, Dwight Hanson on behalf of the Alliance. Unlike other surplus properties in the state, this is a property that has ongoing need because the people that live there are going to live someplace. So instead of treating it like a surplus property that gets sold to the benefit of the general fund, we ought to take a look at it and say, this had value as a housing. We need housing in the community. Let's take that value and transfer it. We support the staff's report. It's the first time we've seen anything like this, and it's a breath of fresh air. Thank you.
Next witness.
Eric Stern, SEIU California DD Council. In alignment with Senator Stone, just hate to see this property given away. And yeah, for future, any other closure should really be dedicated to this community.
Thank you. Next witness.
I'm a land parent of a 24-year-old daughter with disabilities. I want to echo the comments of Mr. London. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will entertain a motion that we make a recommendation to Budget Sub 4 that the transfer should require a minimum of 20% of any housing developed by the CSU or any of its affiliates that is available and affordable to individuals with developmental disabilities and be served by original center pursuant to Welfare Institutions Code.
Madam Chair.
Senator Stone.
I appreciate that the recommendation is going beyond what the governor had in his revise. I think it's important that we send an important message that we want to preserve those assets for the benefit of the developmentally disadvantaged communities.
And you understand that this is within the purview of Sub 4?
Okay. But what I was going to suggest is, would it be appropriate at this time to require a minimum of 50% to send a message that we believe that we should be sending a preponderance of any assets and revenues back into the developmentally disadvantaged pool?
I would recommend that you reach out to the chair and your colleague on sub 4 and express that
I will.
desire.
I will.
Because again, it's not within our purview.
Okay.
And so it's within the purview of sub 4, and so feel free to have that direct conversation.
Okay.
Okay? Can I?
Motion, recommendation.
So on the recommendation before us, which is a minimum of 20%, and it's indeed a minimum, Senator
Right.
Stone.
Right, I understand that, and I'm going to support the motion. I will
You want
champion whatever I can to make sure that those monies go to help the neediest of the needy.
Got you, thank you. So that recommendation will go to our colleagues in sub 4 on a 3-0 recommended vote. Issue number 6, fire alarm system upgrade at Porterville.
Yes,
Capital outlay.
Capital outlay project at Porterville, the same as the January budget. As noted, we believe the fire alarm system integration would greatly improve the safety considerations at the center.
LAO.
We agree with the staff that it only makes sense to upgrade the fire alarm system in the areas that are not in the general treatment area, since we're planning on closing that.
Finance.
We continue to support the governor's budget. We can continue to review the scope to determine what could be removed due to the closure of the non-secured treatment area, while taking into consideration the safety of the consumers and the staff under the current alarm system and protocols versus the proposed project safety features in those buildings when the project is complete. We would be willing to support, report to the legislature through supplemental report language or JLBC notification to report on the proposed scope prior to preliminary plan approval. However, given the staff's recommendation in the agenda, if this subcommittee decides to move forward in this way, we would request at least the addition of the transition buildings to the scope.
Thank you for that. Public comment on this item? Public comment? I'm going to ask that we make a recommendation as noted in the agenda, recognizing that finance can go before the Joint Legislative Budget Committee and change the scope at a future date. And so based on that, I'm going to stick to the recommendation in the agenda.
Move it.
That's out, 3-0. Thank you. Moving on to issue number 7.
These are the deferred maintenance projects.
I'm sorry, issue number 8. No.
7.
Issue number 7.
These are the
Deferred maintenance projects.
Deferred maintenance projects. They're the same as in the January budget proposal. We would just note again that the well project really does address a significant health and safety issue, and the camera and key system addresses ongoing security issues there.
Thank you. LAO?
Nothing.
Finance. Public comment. I can't believe no one is going to comment on the boilers. Really? I guess it's going to have to be up to me.
Make the motion.
I am going to recommend that the boiler retrofit not be approved. Do you support that, Senator Motti?
Follow your lead.
Senator Stone? That is out with a 3-0 recommendation. We're going to go back, if you will, to Shannon's Mountain Development, which is on page 5 of the agenda. You'll recall we pulled that from vote only so we could include it in discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Department of Developmental Services has been working in conjunction with the Department of General Services, with the Health and Human Services Agency, and the Government Operations Agency to develop language to allow for a mixed-use community at Fairview Developmental Center that would be similar to the Harbor Village project, which currently exists there. So we've proposed language that does a number of things. It allows for the ground lease of 20 acres for a period of 55 years to develop affordable housing for individuals with developmental disabilities. The language would also require that a minimum of 20% of the units be set aside for affordable housing for individuals with developmental disabilities. And we would also include language that requires the department to share in any, it would allow the department to share in any proceeds that are generated from the project. Those proceeds would go into the Developmental Services Trust Fund and would be used for operation of the facility, of the new facility. The department would have oversight responsibility, administrative responsibility, and general operations responsibility for the new facility. And it would allow the Department of General Services to enter into a lease that is at less than market value as long as the cost of administering the lease is recovered as part of the project. And I think one of the major final pieces is the fact that the project, even though it's exempt from some of the components of a public works project, is still required to comply with the prevailing wage aspect of a public works project.
LAO. Finance. Senator Stone.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure I'm understanding all of this. It's the intent that the 20% that you're talking about is going to be designated for disabled consumers only, correct?
That's correct, Senator. The way DGS, in our discussions that we've had with them, I think the way they envision this working is the state will issue a request for proposal. And in that, there will be a scoring system so that various components of the project will be assigned weighted values. And one of the components that they would score on is the percentage of affordable housing that the developer could provide. So the higher the percentage, if they have to do a minimum of 20%. If they can do more, then that will improve their scoring when they submit their bid.
So would the balance, whatever that be, the 80% or 75%, would that be just affordable housing for non-development disabled people?
It would be, yes, whatever the project kind of pencils out to be.
Do we think that the 20% would suffice for the need, especially when we're closing down some of these larger centers to have an appropriate place for people to go?
We think that it will definitely provide a significant amount of affordable housing for individuals that may be transitioning from Fairviews.
And I think you made it very clear that we'll be using prevailing wage, and that the revenues generated will go back into the developmentally disabled pot of money to be spent.
That's correct.
And then can you just elaborate on the less than market value leases?
Sure. That's a common process that the Department of General Services uses when they, if they're selling state land for the development of an affordable housing unit, they will sell it at less than market value, or sell or lease at less than market value so that they can get interested developers.
But if they sell at less than market values, there's going to be a caveat with the contract with the developer that you're only going to have certain levels of revenue you're going to be getting from these units.
Because yes, they're developing it for affordable housing, so yes.
So I assume that the legislature doesn't get into the minutia of those details. We're just basically saying if we're going to sell less than market value, we are going to have lower rents for our lower income folks that are going to be living there.
That's correct.
Okay.
Following up on Senator Stone's question, the 20% minimum doesn't preclude one from leasing or renting to a larger percentage of individuals with developmental disabilities, does it not?
No, it does not preclude that.
Okay.
Again, it will be based on what is in the winning proposal. the developers that want to be successful at this may
Increase it.
increase it to
Right.
25%.
But then but there is a desire for it to be an integrated community.
Absolutely.
And so the 100% is not desirable, so it's how you find a
That's correct.
healthy mix.
Exactly. The intent
balance.
is to model it after Harbor Village, which is very successfully integrated.
Senator Stone.
Can I follow up on your
Please.
question? Thank you. So this 20% that is minimum for disabled consumers, many times these units have to be specially constructed to make sure that you have, larger hallways, accessibility for a wheelchair-bound person to be able to get into a bathtub or shower. So is there any way when we do this request for proposal, I presume that we're going to have, is that we ensure that these other units that may not be destined at the time to be used by the developmentally disabled are constructed in such a way that they're portable so that they can be converted without horrific expense for those that are developmentally disabled?
That's a good question, Senator. I would have to, I think, wait until we.
Because it's not that much more expensive.
Point,
you know what
I don't know.
It's much more expensive to go in after the fact.
Correct.
And to make the hallways larger and to provide that accessibility. It's not that much more of an investment to make them portable in the event that we have, with our rapidly growing aging population, we have more people that may in fact be candidates for this type of housing. So I would just throw out there, just as a businessman, that maybe we somehow put it out to bid that these units that are not for the time period being reserved for the developmentally disabled can, without a horrific expense, be quickly converted to one unit that could potentially house somebody like that.
Sure, understand.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Public comment, please.
Madam Chair, members, Dwight Hanson on behalf of the Alliance. This is the most exciting proposal I've seen in a long time. If any community in any of your districts were to propose a 20% set aside for special needs housing, we would be having parades. This is an exciting proposal. The developers are going to bid on this issue. As long as they know going in that their hallways have to be wider or whatever, they'll do whatever they need to do. Senator Stone is correct that going back and retrofitting is the most difficult part. But these guys, if they have the leverage and the sub-market lease and some of those things, they'll be able to do this thing. And like I said, if it was in your district and you had a 20% set aside, we'd be ecstatic. So this is a great program. Whether or not it's adjacent to Fairview is irrelevant. This is a great project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
I think my biggest concern is the 20% and that we're in a housing crisis across the state of California. So the 20% said, I've been to Harbor Village. It's an extraordinary project. Shannon's Mountain's right next door. Sacramento County's here. Bay Area's there. So what are we doing in this extreme housing crisis for people with developmental disabilities? And do I think that you could purchase condos and retrofit them effectively, efficiently, and cost effectively? Absolutely, where an individual could have a home of their own much quicker than this process will take. I don't oppose Shannon's Mountain. I just oppose that I don't have housing for people that are across this great state in supported living services, and they want that opportunity. So you can buy condos, we can retrofit, we just need to figure out, if we can figure out this problem, then we can figure out the housing problem across the state of California. So I hope we use our collective minds and figure that out.
Thank you. Next witness.
Eileen Ritchie Arca. We support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Will Senator Futures Explored also support the proposal? My only concern is if Fairview's not closed, ability to get federal funding for this will be a challenge under the settings. Hopefully it'll close first, but.
Next witness.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. On behalf of the Regional Center of Orange County, I want to thank the department and staff for all of their work in developing this proposal. We really appreciate it. In addition to Shannon's Mountain, we would just want to point out that it's not just people who are transitioning out of Fairview Developmental Center, but also those who might use their Section 8 affordable housing vouchers that are also eligible to live on Shannon's Mountain property. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next witness.
Madam Chair, members, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak on these items all day long today, so thank you. California Disability Services Association, Carl London, on behalf of them, we support this as well. We're very excited about this. This has been on our radar for the last 3 years. And the 20% number seems fair because we do have to worry about balancing the model of integration for our population. So well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Hello, I'm Robert Benson. I belong to the President for your member of CDCAM and much help. I think this is great. It's my citizens don't have maybe all of it for me at that moment. So when we can move in, but also somehow make a cap because I was able to since the 80% of the residents all have disabilities. I mean, this is the way to integrate people with disabilities and those without. And maybe my fear is about it. But I think we should avoid having too high a percentage of clients because we want this to be a mixed community. And even if we're able-bodied community that people with disabilities live in. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let's dance.
Good afternoon, Senator Mitchell. Tony Anderson, the Executive Director of the ARC of California, and also representing United Cerebral Palsy California Collaboration. I couldn't resist an opportunity to come up here and support this proposal, and as you've heard before about the terrible problems that we have with affordable and accessible housing. This is an example of something that can be done, and it's just a small piece, and we need a lot more done in this area, but thank you.
Thank you very much. Referring back to page 6 of the agenda, we recommend approval of the May revise as modified, and we'll be adding placeholder language. And that's out with a 3-0 recommendation.